Welcome, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Climate Plans and Planning Virtual Symposium. This is a collaboration between the City of Portsmouth and Portsmouth Climate Solutions. Portsmouth Climate Solutions is a group of concerned citizens in the Seacoast region, led by Bert Cohen, who act to promote activities in support of reducing climate change. We're working in collaboration with the City of Portsmouth to enable the symposium today. The goals of the symposium are to build a network for mutual support of climate planning activities, to develop an understanding of what is happening regionally regarding climate planning, and to realize areas for collaboration. Each attendee will be called upon to state who they are and the town or organization they represent. Since there are more than one of you representing each organization, I will call out the name of the organization, and then you can introduce yourselves, and then the one that is going to do the talking about climate planning should follow the introductions of the other people. So due to time constraints, one representative is the only one that's allowed to provide the entire climate plan or what you've done thus far. And so we have approximately 5 minutes due to the number of people that we have for each speaker. This will be followed by a question and answer session with discussion and support from any of the subject matter experts in our group. And then we'll close with what the next steps will be as we move forward. As Peter said, the meeting is being recorded, and a link to this recording will be posted on the City of Portsmouth website sustainability page. Our host for this meeting is Deglin McEachern, the Mayor of Portsmouth. So, Mr. Mayor, if you can take it away, please.
Sure. Well, thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining. It's a huge honor to be able to host something like this, but just the beginning of the work. When I was elected, seems now a lifetime ago as we've found ourselves in budget season, but back in January, climate was one of the main pillars that we have discussed in the inauguration. And I come to that in becoming a climate activist from a standpoint of a couple of different perspectives. One, from an infrastructure standpoint, it's incredibly expensive. Infrastructure alone it keeps me up at night in terms of how do we fund it. All the competing priorities, all of those competing priorities are only going to be worse with climate change. And I think that it took me becoming a city councilor and then mayor to truly understand the actual cost that we will face as a country, but each local community. So action needs to happen, and the faster the action can happen, the better. The second, I think there's a huge opportunity for municipalities to lead on climate. I'm proud that we are building a climate action plan, and I'd love to hear if other communities are further along the road with us. We passed that as a part of our capital improvement, dedicating $100,000 in the first year to build something where we can address not only how do we reduce our carbon footprint as a city, but how do we bring more people along with that? And I think that speaks to the final point on climate from a municipal standpoint, is that I think there's a huge opportunity to lead on this from a municipal standpoint. We only account for probably not more than 1.5% of total usage of energy usage when it comes to the city of Portsmouth. The vast majority are our residents, but we do have a unique opportunity to educate, to inform, and to lead when it comes to proactive climate measures, coupled with communication and how do we engage the population is really a part of the climate action plan that I think I am most excited about, so that folks understand the cost, but then the benefit of proactive climate measures. And it's easy to be a cynic in this. There's a lot of things, I think, when you get into government and dealing with competing priorities, that it's easy to be really cynical. And I'm always cheered up by my friend Bert, who says that he loves my optimism. So I am an optimistic person, and I think that the failure of governments typically results from a failure of imagination, a failure of a future that can be different and better than the present that we live in. And I only have to look out of my office window here in the city of Portsmouth and see the Piscataqua that leads out to the Gulf of Maine. Now, the Gulf of Maine is rising in terms of temperature faster than any body of water on the planet, but it's also home to potentially an enormous amount of energy from wind production. So there is a lot that we can do, starting on the smallest level in the city, reaching out to more of our citizens and having them be engaged in the process, and then thinking a little bit bigger of what can we do as a region to focus on climate. How can we band together on some of the wind projects that will be coming down the pipe, so to speak, in the future. And that gives me a lot of hope that the areas most affected by climate change can hold some of the answers to mitigating its effects. So I'm super glad that everybody came, and hopefully I didn't take up more time than was allotted to me by Allison, but I did want to thank everyone. And this is a first of many conversations that I look forward to having among communities, because Portsmouth is not going to solve this, Newmarket's not going to solve this, Durham's not going to solve this without us coming together and figuring out how to solve this together. So I really do look forward to that conversation, and thank you for allowing me to host the first of hopefully many.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Okay, sure. So I'm going through the questions that Allison sent out with the agenda, and I'm going to talk about those in terms of Portsmouth and what we've done as a municipal government. So how have we addressed climate change? So in the city of Portsmouth, we became an eco-municipality in 2005. That uses the natural step systems approach for integrating sustainability into the fabric of decision-making. For people that don't know about that, it's looking at each opportunity or problem by reducing pollution, reducing chemicals, protecting the environment, and treating people equitably as a starting point for decision-making. As a result of this framework, supports the city's approach to addressing climate change from a systems point of view. In terms of how we've addressed climate change on the ground, the city has applied for and received funding for the Coastal Resilience Initiative, which laid out potential future impacts from climate change and went into significant detail on the sea level rise impacts. As a follow-on to that project, we did the Historic District Vulnerability Assessment, where we looked at our historic district. Our city council approved an extended flood hazard zone in our zoning ordinance to provide additional flood risk protection for property owners, and recently we partnered with Strawberry Bank on a new exhibit. There's more items I'll talk about later, but those are sort of the big ones I want to talk about. And then who's been involved? In Portsmouth, we have a Blue Ribbon Committee on Sustainable Practices. They've brought forward and supported many of the city's efforts. The city's planning department has gotten grants and completed the studies mentioned above, with assistance from a local advisory committee of stakeholders on this topic. The Portsmouth City Council, as I said, did the extended floodplain regulations. They, as Mayor McEachran mentioned, supported the capital outlay for climate action plan up to $100,000, approved a renewable energy policy, which created an energy advisory committee, and then they voted to become members of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, which is a significant step in renewable energy that'll help with climate change mitigation. So some of our organizational priorities as an eco-municipality, we, as I said before, we take the systems approach to sustainability and climate change. As a municipal government, we're working to inform the public of possible changes as they will present themselves going forward. And nobody knows exactly how these impacts will come to the city, but we're working to understand the impacts so we can inform people in the city and be aware and adapt to the changes that are coming. The barriers to success, one of the significant things the mayor mentioned was competing priorities. And so due to the fact that climate change is sort of an emerging problem, there hasn't been a department or specific budget allocations for the work necessary. That's a significant barrier we're working to address. The funding for the Climate Action Plan puts funds directly towards the problem, and it's likely that the Climate Action Plan will include funding needs for the city, which will give it more standing in upcoming budget processes and grant writing, and potentially ideas about a change or expansion of the current municipal structure, among other things, to tackle some of the challenges ahead. It's not easy to predict what the future holds. Uncertainty is a big barrier when it comes to sea level rise, temperature changes, rainfall events, equity impacts, and other things brought on or exacerbated by climate change. But we'll continue to be challenged by it and work to address those things for our community. In terms of the biggest successes, I've mentioned some of them above in terms of the reports. Moving forward, we have a city council that's educated and interested in learning about what we can do to tackle climate change. The mayor and city manager have supported the work spelled out in Drawdown, the book by Paul Hawken, and support the creation of a climate action plan to help guide the city forward. Thanks, Bert. While we were able to get grant funds to pay for our two biggest past projects, the approval of $100,000 in capital funding is a significant step forward and a commitment to take action. And then what we would have done differently, I think I don't have the best answer for this. I think it's a tough question, but I'm pleased to say we've made a lot of progress with our understanding and public outreach, but always hopeful we can do more to increase our public participation and engagement around upcoming climate action plan. I know I've been sort of banging that drum with people that public participation is really huge and key on this climate action plan process. And then finally, where do we see the climate action plan in the next 1 to 3 years? As I said previously, there's a $100,000 program to start this summer. I'm hopeful the plan includes unprecedented levels of public participation and is able to influence residents, business owners, visitors, and others in Portsmouth and the region to take meaningful action to reduce the impact of climate change or take actions towards adapting to the impact of climate change. From there, hopefully climate change adaptation and mitigation become a priority for the city government and the residents in the city and the businesses, so that we can continue to make positive strides each year. I don't know how I did. I didn't time myself, but hopefully that's
Great, Peter. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Hampton next.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jason Bashand. I am Hampton's town planner. I also have on the meeting today is Brianna O'Brien, our conservation coordinator. I'm going to go through the series of questions for you. If Brianna wants to chime in, that's fine. I know we only have 5 minutes, but let me begin. So how has your organization addressed climate change? So I would use the word addressing more than address. I think we do have much work to do, although we are working on a lot of great initiatives in Hampton. Several years ago, when I first started in Hampton, about 7.5 years ago, we were working on the Tide Storms Vulnerability Assessment with the Rockingham Planning Commission, and a lot has come of that since. We're working on our comprehensive master plan update right now, and that includes a coastal resilience component and general integration of climate issues with that ongoing plan update that's slated to be completed at the end of 22. We're also, in 2017, we did a rewrite of our floodplain management ordinance, and we have some ongoing activities right now relate to improve that ordinance. Also, the Hampton Beach Area Commission is working on some master plan efforts. They held a coastal resilience symposium back in February of 2021. It was very well attended, I think about 100 people, and they got a lot of great input from that to work toward their coastal resilience update of their master plan. And also our hazard mitigation plan update is beginning now. So, and I know that's going to have a climate component. That's one of the things that was cited in our recent meeting as we start that process. Now, who has been involved? That would be town department heads such as myself, Brianna and Conservation, our Public Works Director, and other related departments, Fire Department, Police Department, and others have been involved. Town boards and commissions, the Planning Board and its Master Plan Steering Committee, Conservation Commission, the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and the Hampton Beach Area Commission. In Hampton, we also have a Coastal Hazard and Adaptation Team, or otherwise known as CHAT, which is a partnership with the Seabrook Hampton Estuaries Alliance, We also have resident representatives that serve on that, and many of the people that I just noted. We also work closely with the DES Coastal Program, PREP, the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership, SHAE, as I noted, and Rockingham Planning Commission, among others. Our organization's priorities really focus on coastal flooding and anticipated sea level rise. I mean, those are, being a coastal community, those are where our most serious issues have lied. So that's been the area of focus in my time that we've been on. What are or have been the barriers to success? Well, I would say limited and already overcommitted town staff is one of them. One of the things that we've talked about is a dedicated coastal resilience coordinator or a similar position. I really think that's necessary in Hampton. We don't have the staff power to really take on a lot of these issues to the level we'd like. Also, in terms of FEMA, we have some NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, compliance issues that are being addressed, but they're delaying us from pursuing next level initiatives, namely applying to the community rating system, or CRS, which is something that we've been trying and looking forward to doing for a few years now. And, you know, there's always the issue that everybody faces with resistance and skepticism by some political interests and so forth, but that seems to be improving over time. I think people are seeing what's happening at the beach with coastal flooding issues and so forth, and it's really opening a lot of eyes. So I think that that's come a long way in my time in Hampton. What have been your biggest successes? The comprehensive rewrite of our town's floodplain management ordinance, as I noted, in 2017, although we do need some updates and we are working on those. A very successful and ongoing townwide master plan update. We've had significant input from residents and business owners. Many of them are citing the importance of, you know, coastal flooding and other climate change issues and incorporating those. What we have done differently, tackling a broad range of climate change issues a bit sooner rather than focusing exclusively on the coastal flooding and sea level rise. I mean, those are critical issues in Hampton, but branching out into other important issues, maybe things like EV charging stations or reducing areas of asphalt, things like that, that maybe we could take a closer look at. Working, as might have been noted earlier, about working things into our CIP program. Those are important things that we still need to look more at. And where do we see our climate action plan in the next 1 to 3 years? Well, we just have a lot of activities ongoing. The implementation of the comprehensive master plan update, once that's adopted, many recommendations relate to climate change and coastal flooding that we're seeing. So we do, you know, anticipate setting those things in motion. The HBAC's amended coastal resilience and environment component to their master plan, which they're getting underway with 2023, that should be done. Our floodplain management ordinance is going to get a major overhaul, I think, in March of 2024. We're working with some grant funding right now in projects to look at things like the New Hampshire Coastal Flood Risk Part 2 guidance and incorporating sea level rise design flood elevation requirements and implementation of recommendations of Coastal Hazards and Adaptation Team, or CHAT. That's another ongoing item. Some recommendations have come out of that group, and we're working to implement those. So did the best I could in 5 minutes there. I hope that that's a good summary for everybody.
Yeah, very nice, Jason. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Brianna?
I'm the conservation coordinator, as Jason said. I don't have anything really to add to what Jason said. Thanks.
Okay. Let's start with the UNH Sustainability Institute. Either Daviva or Jennifer.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about what UNH has done in terms of climate action planning, and also how we can be a resource. We have been at this since at least 2001, when we did our first greenhouse gas inventory, in the formation of an energy task force on campus in 2005, which was really originally geared toward energy cost savings, but quickly took on elements of climate and got a lot of energy, no pun intended, out of that. Kind of broadened stewardship, set us up to make a carbon neutrality commitment in 2009 as part of what was then called the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, which is kind of like the Global Covenant of Mayors, where we committed to an ultimate goal of carbon neutrality, at least by 2050, but also committed to annual reporting of our footprint and updating a climate action plan every 5 years. So we did our first one in 2009, which was very broad and comprehensive, and the Energy Task Force broke into groups and then did a pretty extensive stakeholder engagement process. Set a goal that we had no idea how we would meet, and that was a 50% reduction by 2020. And we were able to meet it a year early. So you didn't ask the question, what are you glad you did per se, but I guess this kind of falls under successes. We were, in retrospect, really glad we set a goal we didn't know how we were going to meet. We've updated the climate action plan twice since, one in 2014, and then we were due to do it again in 2019, which blended to 2020, and then 2021. So we just released that. The second two iterations had much less broad stakeholder engagement, much more strategically targeted stakeholder engagement. And at the same time, and this is maybe, I don't know if it's a barrier or something I would do differently, but in our second round of climate action planning, we focused pretty heavily on behavior change for the community and having that be a pretty significant strategy. And but we didn't do anything in terms of implementation mechanisms, specific implementation mechanisms, really kind of thinking through how that would happen. We just set broad goals and figured we would figure it out. And we still are working on figuring that out. And I would say that's probably one of our biggest challenges. The infrastructure pieces are also, of course, hard. Capital funding, always hard. Politics, always hard. But the having it, kind of dispersing it out so that there's really community ownership in a really decentralized institution continues to be our big challenge. And one of the things that we're working on now in this next round of climate action planning is, or one of the things we worked on in our last round of climate action planning was getting more granular in terms of ways to like mechanisms for holding people accountable for that kind of organizational behavior change. So what can we put into job descriptions? And how could we work with student orgs and different departments and kind of crosswalk their needs with our goals? So a lot more work trying to, I guess I would almost say work backwards rather than sort of starting with the climate action and push that out, rather looking at all the partners that we're working with, what are they working toward, and how do we integrate the climate action pieces into their job descriptions, their day-to-day mandates, their yearly work plans, etc. I'm gonna stop there and let Deveb talk about kind of research and the academic piece and how that relates, and maybe how we can be a resource in some of our partnerships.
Sure, great, thanks, Jen. Can everyone hear me? I see my screen is frozen, but can you hear me okay? All right,
yes.
Great. All right, the Zoom at UNH is not always to be desired, so glad you can hear me. So thanks, Jen. So my name is Dovev Levine. I've got a couple roles at UNH. One is my day job is I'm a dean at the graduate school here at UNH. I work in the student affairs area with master's and doctoral students. Then I'm also a fellow at the Sustainability Institute with Jen. I've been with the SI folks for I think about 6 years now. So it's been a wonderful just career and place to grow, and also think about the intersections of academia and climate change, and also municipalities and what we can do to help out from the university side. And most importantly, maybe I'm also a Portsmouth resident. I've been in town since 2003, and we love it. So I certainly got a vested interest in this work going forward in many ways. So just to tack on what Jen noted, so to add on to that, you may have heard this, but if you haven't, UNH is top ranked nationally for university sustainability action. And a lot of that owes to our faculty and student-based research that specifically focuses on climate change. We have an array of grad students currently engaged in research projects focused on municipality-based climate action, including a PhD student that I supervise myself. I think there's a lot of potential for Portsmouth to partake and gain from that. We all know that municipalities across the nation are, like any office, often there's an office of one. We think about that quite a bit, and we think there's a lot of ways that the things that we do and have our students focus on, there's a lot more opportunity, I think, for applied research that could be really on the ground, that could really benefit the students to give them that experience and also simultaneously really add to the capacity of municipalities like Portsmouth to do all kinds of things on their climate front, including potential for greenhouse gas inventories, climate action planning, and so forth. A leading example of that student research is our Sustainability Fellows Program. This is a thing I work very closely with Jen on and some of our colleagues at the Sustainability Institute. That's a summer-based full immersion experience where we have around 30 fellows engage in sustainability projects. Those fellows tend to be either upper level undergraduates or kind of early career grad students. So on the younger side, but at the same time becoming increasingly experienced. We kind of really see them as part of the next generation of sustainability professionals that we're helping to train through their experience. So those fellows focus all summer long, 40 hours a week, 10 weeks in a row on all kinds of sustainability projects. And a lot of those are specifically focused on municipality-based climate action. We've had fellows over the last 15, 16 years doing all kinds of work on coastal resilience, greenhouse gas inventories, energy efficiency, climate action planning, and so forth. Portsmouth has had a number of fellows. Just one in particular that I'm thinking of now, Andrea worked with Peter actually as a mentor a few years ago. She then went on to work with the city of Louisville in Kentucky in their sustainability office, went back to academia to work for Indiana University, doing kind of a somewhat similar program for fellows at IU, and has now gone on to state level work focused on climate resiliency in North Carolina. And we talk to Andrea frequently, and we can certainly say with utmost confidence, a lot of that development and leadership on her end is in part due to her time in Portsmouth as a fellow and with UNH as a fellow simultaneously. So just to kind of close up then, so what Jen and I are working on with a number of colleagues at UNH is really trying to think about how we continue to develop and have more and more of those student and faculty-led projects that could really pair right up with what communities in our region need, like Portsmouth. And then last but not least, I also want to just mention too that Portsmouth has been a longstanding, very active member in the New England Municipality Sustainability Network. Peter has been one of our steering committee members for, I can't remember how long for her, and also a recent co-chair. And Peter has been an absolute just, dynamo as a leader in that front. And what that network does is pair up about 30 to 35 cities and towns across New England to work together on the municipal front, specifically on issues of sustainability with a climate focus. So that's all led, that network is led out of UNH. We're essentially the administrative body that helps to coordinate everything and get those cities together. And so I again think that there's opportunity within that through UNH and then see how things can intersect. So we're looking forward to continue to develop the partnerships.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Let's go to Rockingham Regional Planning Commission. Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jen Rowden. I'm the Land Use Program Manager here at Rockingham Planning Commission. For those of you that might not know us, we are the Regional Planning Commission that serves 27 of Rockingham County's municipalities, including 7 coastal communities. Our sister agency, Stratford Planning Commission, serves some of the other coastal communities in New Hampshire. But as far as how our organization has addressed climate change, we really focus on land use planning and transportation. So we come at it from sort of a regional perspective on those 2 topics. So climate change gets worked into a lot of our work that we do in those arenas. But we have been some of the first in the state actually to start tackling this. We worked on the tides to storms maps that were some of the first regional coastal maps that address sea level rise for our region. So that was some of our start, was really working with the coastal program from DES and working on that mapping project. Our priorities are really helping our municipalities that are our member organizations to be able to take the latest science and information out there and apply it to their community planning efforts and their infrastructure investments, and using that best science to help them with their land use planning. Some of our recent projects have been doing a Seacoast corridor, transportation corridor assessment that looks at sea level rise and its impacts on our transportation network, developing a resilience land use guide to help local municipalities adopt land use regulations that address a lot of community goals, but with the lens of sea level rise and climate change. adaptation, helping with master plans, hazard mitigation plans, local regulations. And we're starting to do really a foray into energy efficiency and mitigation efforts. But for the most part, our history has largely been adaptation efforts and really helping with a lot of the infrastructure and land use planning aspects of that with our municipalities and serving as a resource. But really probably our biggest success has been getting a lot of funding to our region and our municipalities to move efforts forward. But our biggest challenge is doing that in sort of a stop and start, spurts and spits approach because of funding and staffing. If we had done things differently from the get-go, we probably would have not focused so much on climate change as a topic, but putting it into a foray into all of the different topics we deal with, from transportation planning and land use to housing, to municipal services that occur and hazard mitigations and drinking water protection, really putting it into all of those arenas, which we're really starting to do at this point because we have enough information, enough base. But as far as our sort of next steps, we are currently also working on developing a sustainability framework for a regional coordinator program to really help some of our municipalities that maybe can't have the Jackson or the Peter or the Brianna, that the smaller municipalities that simply don't have enough work to support someone from energy efficiency, climate adaptation, hazard mitigation sort of efforts, but can be focused and not repeat and reinvent the wheel on that municipal side because there is that funding and that dedication time that we're seeing there's a real need for. So we are working on that as our next sort of stepping goal. I think that was under 5 minutes and probably too much, but.
No, it was great. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just trying to take some notes. Okay, let's move on to Stratum. I see, Dave, you've joined us.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to participate. In Stratum, one of the smaller towns in the region, we certainly have had a different level of energy and focus on the some aspects of responding to the climate challenge. There's basically 3 areas that our efforts have been would fall under. We have our eye on, in particular, the coastal flooding issues as it relates to our transportation network, and we are participating in some projects on some vulnerable areas that were identified in the 2017 Sea Rise report that we're very fortunate to have been able to have Rockingham Planning Commission work for us on. And that planning has guided some investments in culverts and helped educate our approaches to other project planning on the transportation side. We are working on energy efficiency. We have a very energetic and engaged energy commission who have been involved in assessing our municipal operations, our relatively manageable municipal facilities that are relatively new. We have done a solar project on a police station that has been a great experience and learning opportunity. But also on the solar front, we have recently updated our zoning regulations to be in line with current well-regarded practices that have hopefully made the process and the opportunity to add solar for residential settings more streamlined, as well as more accessible for people who are exploring that. We probably spend the most time thinking about water and water quality and water quantity. And that is a major issue for Stratham because unlike most all of our Seacoast partner towns, we do not have any public water or sewer serving a significant portion of our community. That means that we have over 5,000 residents who are only dependent upon private drinking water wells. And all of the risks that come with that in the state that include not only contamination threats and newly emerging contaminants, but water quantity and even threats to wellhead protection areas by coastal flooding. So and to put that number in perspective of the number of people relying on private drinking water wells, that is we have 20%, excuse me, no, it's 30% of the people who rely on drinking water wells in the Seacoast region of New Hampshire, they live in Stratham. And that's by virtue of that description I've provided about not having public water serving our communities. So we're focused on trying to alleviate and plan for the future. Oddly, we've been somewhat aided in that work by a contamination challenge in our town center with PFAS that has really, that and new regulations affecting community water systems and other education efforts about drinking water challenges in our community have caused people to think about what is the future and how can we increase and have a more resilient water supply for the people who live here. And that is an ongoing and important process that before has focused on economic development opportunities, but has now really molded into responding to water quality threats and with climate change quantity that we have experienced with recent droughts. So we are seeing more and more people pay attention to this issue by virtue of these very challenges. So thank you again for the opportunity to share that, and look forward to hearing more of the stories.
Great, David, thank you. Let's move now to Jackson Gaspari.
Sure. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm Jackson Gaspari. I'm the Resilience Coordinator for the City of Dover, New Hampshire. And you know, Devev mentioned the Fellows program earlier. I'm a living example of that. I was a Sustainability Institute Fellow back in 2018 with the Planning Department, and had the opportunity to come back and work full time with them, which was awesome. So I'll just walk through the series of questions here. So how has our organization addressed climate change? You know, I think we've done a whole lot, and I'll just be able to scratch the surface, which is a good thing. But I'll highlight some good examples. So we just put out the Dover Path to Resilience, which is a nice timeline that folks can reference for some of the activities we engaged in over the past 10 years or so. But you know, those include the production of some reports like our climate adaptation chapter of our city's master plan, the baseline greenhouse gas and nitrogen inventory report for municipal school operations that I produced. Our Energy Commission regularly puts out annual reports. So they just released a 2022 report with some really good recommendations in it. And I'm also working on a citywide resilience plan that we're hoping to release to the public by the end of this calendar year. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to explore a lot of topics in depth and have some really fine-tuned implementation strategies. And we're trying to expand our public outreach. So I recently created the Resilient Dover portion of the city website, which houses a number of resources. One being a compiled portal for all of our various climate resources. So we worked with a climate resources planning team which was a collaboration with UNH Extension and New Hampshire Sea Grant, as well as Stratford Regional Planning Commission, to develop 2-page fact sheets and short about 3-minute videos to help make these resources more digestible. And then we held a Dover Climate Resources Forum, which many members of our city staff, boards and commission members attended to help them become more familiar with what was available and out there, and help them network and connect on how they could implement these resources in their day-to-day work as volunteers. So I think that was really useful, because we don't want these reports to just, sit on a shelf somewhere. We want them to be implemented. So that was a really big success. We've worked on adopting some improvements to our regulations, like amendments to our site review regulations to promote electric vehicle supply equipment infrastructure. We created a parking space cap to help with our problem with impervious surface, because we're trying to address our issues with nitrogen runoff into the Great Bay. Some big solar projects, the new high school, about 40% of the power for that is supplied by a solar array that's a little under 1 megawatt. We also have solar on our indoor pool and children's museum, which was a cool collaboration with Revision Energy, where they donated a portion of those panels. We're trying to raise public awareness for electric vehicles in general. So in 2021, the Energy Commission hosted our first EV car show, which was a really big success. We had about 30 vehicles present there and some great participation. And we're planning to do that again during 2022 Apple Harvest Day, which is obviously one of our bigger events and draws about 60,000 people to Dover. We're actively expanding our municipal fleet to include more electric vehicles. We just ordered 2 more Nissan Leafs and went through an RFP selection process to get a vendor for increasing municipal charging. I led the charge to, no pun intended, create an agreement or help foster an agreement with Standard Power of America, which involves hydro net metering and is providing us some reimbursements for our electricity. We're basically using that as an asset for producing a revenue stream that we can then have about $10,000 a quarter to devote to either consultants or other efficiency-based projects. We completed a very cool pilot project, a collaboration with UNH to do a tree box stormwater filter, which is really neat. It uses like a biomedia to help remove nitrogen from our stormwater before it enters the rivers. And, obviously we're involved pretty actively with SRPC. I'm part of the resilience subcommittee, and I'm also involved with the coastal adaptation work group. So we've had some great networking through those portals. So who else has been involved? Obviously a lot of city staff members, myself kind of being the point person, but Gretchen Young is our environmental projects manager over in community services. She does a lot of sort of thinking about on the ground work and reducing our stormwater impacts through culvert replacements, rain gardens, things of that nature. And then, in general, planning's involved. Our IT department gets involved for things like, data streamlining, for example, which is super important for us to have a better understanding of how we can improve our systems. And obviously, we have some dedicated, community volunteers. Our Energy Commission is really active. I mentioned them, as is our Conservation Commission, our Open Lands Committee, and our city councilors. And what are our organization's priorities? Some big priorities for us are to expand municipal solar and energy recovery options, really targeting our highest consuming facilities. So we're looking at putting solar at our ice arena and outdoor pool. And we're also looking at recovery options at our wastewater treatment facility as well. I'm trying to get the citywide resilience plan completed. We're actively engaging in land protection and conservation efforts. So the Open Lands Committee has a bit over $1 million to work with currently in our conservation fund. So we're looking to protect more lands in Dover through that. And I think culvert repair replacements are big on community services list. And what have been the barriers to success? So we really haven't had much pushback from our decision-making bodies, which is awesome. We have some great buy-in in terms of, climate change mitigation from our city council. I think the biggest barrier, prior to the creation of my position was staff time. So that's helped. We've also recently hired an outreach coordinator in the planning department. So whereas I haven't been able to engage in as much public outreach, she'll be able to take on some of those opportunities, which I think is really exciting. And Gretchen Young, being the environmental projects manager, definitely aids in that as well. And Jen mentioned this earlier too, and others, but obviously coming up with that initial funding for big capital improvements projects is always challenging. But putting it into a perspective of payback periods and overall cost savings for taxpayers over 20, 30 years is really important. So trying to drive home the message of life cycle returns on investments is something that I've been pushing for, instead of just making that bottom line budget decision when the time comes. And what have been some of our biggest successes? I think the Energy Commission was advocating for my position for a few years. So I think finally getting that created, they think is a really big success. The new city council, one of their goals, the goal number 6, was our city is resilient. And so they are really, pushing for a lot of the initiatives that we're supporting. And we're going to set incremental targets to try to hit 100% renewable energy by 2035 for our municipal facilities, which is pretty exciting. Obviously, our big solar projects that have gone through have been sort of things that we have highlighted. And what would we have done differently? It's kind of hard to say. I'm a recent hire. I've been on board full time for about 8 months now, but I think what I've realized so far is there's sometimes lessons learned from things that don't go as well as you would have expected or take a lot more time. For example, we put out an RFP for some solar projects before I was on board, and we didn't get the level of responses we were looking for. It was too general, it was too broad. There weren't enough technical aspects or expertise involved with that process. So taking things away from that, we've realized, okay, maybe we do need to bring in a consultant that has really good knowledge of net metering experience in New Hampshire, for example, that can assist with developing something that's going to get people really excited about responding to projects. And then we'll focus more on individual facilities instead of a broad approach. And where do we see the climate action plan in the next 1 to 3 years? Well, like I mentioned, citywide resiliency plan is sort of something that will come out in the next year or so. Further electrification of our fleet. I think we'll have some sort of energy recovery in place at our treatment facility in that time frame. And we're trying to expand composting activities as well. And there's been talks of putting in place a stormwater utility in the city of Dover to help create a funding mechanism to allow for us to take on some of these capital improvements projects in terms of stormwater reductions and nitrogen impact reductions that we haven't been able to fund previously. So that was kind of a lot. I was spewing information, but I hope it was helpful.
It was great. Thank you very much. Let's see now. We'll go to Steve Fournier, Newmarket Town Manager.
Hi, everybody. A lot of the things have been said by other communities that Newmarket's already been doing. I don't know if everybody realizes Newmarket sort of was a poster child for flooding and coastal issues from the early 2000s, when we had a number of significant flooding events that literally just flooded the downtown. We began addressing those items then, and done everything from looking at, this year we're doing about a $2 million project to replace stormwater as well as other lines on New Road to improve the flow of water in and out. We're doing some riverfront, the Riverfront Advisory Committee has been formed to look at our shoreline along the Lamprey River, which is right through the heart of downtown. So if anything floods there, it actually impacts buildings before it impacts anything else. So they're looking at ways to address that in the downtown area. We've worked with the Moody Point neighborhood. Recently, they've been having issues with their water. They were on wells, and salt was getting into their water, into their wells. So we extended our water lines out to the Moody Point neighborhood. So they now have town water out there as well. We've updated our master plans to address climate change and resiliency. So really a lot of what everybody else has been doing. So I don't want to reiterate and just keep going on that. What do we see as barriers? I think it's, as others said, it's sort of like education. We've sort of snuck in the climate, in the resiliency items in with other projects. You know, any project you look, you try to add those things in. If you go out to somebody and say, hey, look, we're just doing this for climate change, it's not going to pass. It's not the easiest way to do it. If you have a bigger project and just include that in there, that is a better way to sell it. And I think that was key on a number of the projects we've done, including we did a culvert replacement, and it was really for two items. It was climate change, as well as to allow fish to get in and out in an area on Bay Road. And if I went to the council and said, hey, I need $2 million to fix that, there's no way I was going to get it for those two reasons. So he said, you know, emergency management, that this is the only way in and out of there. So I think that's one of the things, is really how to sell it without to the elected officials. Other than that, I think, you know, 1 to 3 years, we'll still keep moving forward. We're going to try to address, because we have both the river and the bay that we have to look at, and we're just going to try to address those issues.
Okay, great. Steve, thank you. Todd Seelig?
Great, thanks so much. So Alice, I was wondering, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yeah, I think Peter can arrange that.
Yeah, if you could enable that, that'd be great. So I'm Todd Seelig from the town of Durham, and I just want to take off my glasses and be clear that Steve Fournier and I are not twins, although we look a lot alike. So.
It's the stress of the job of running a town.
All right, so I'm going to approach this a little differently to not be repetitive, because people have talked about a lot of great projects happening around the seacoast. So I guess we came at this from a perspective of dealing with hazards and associated with significant weather events in the early 2000s. So, if you think back, the Mother's Day flood of 2006, we lost the ability to get to several neighborhoods in Durham, creating real problems for us. We'd lose roads, state roads, local roads, and that caused us to think about what was going on, because that experience was different than any of us had remembered in our history. And in fact, from 2006 to 2018, our Public Works Department tracked something like 12 or more unusually large, significant storm events that were highly destructive to the community. So we slowly began to connect that those storms were probably in one way or another related to climate change, and we needed to start to gear up. So that caused us to look at our critical infrastructure through hazard mitigation planning and begin to build long-term improvements into our sort of regular routine maintenance of roads, of culverts, et cetera, so that slowly over time in a sustainable way, we could make improvements so that we would not lose neighborhoods over the long term. That also caused us to think about what we could do locally to start to mitigate our impact on climate change and to reduce our carbon footprint. In the early years, it was hard because we didn't really have a way to measure it. We weren't measuring it. We were just trying to do projects. And so some things we did, we built a new LEED certified town hall. We actually went around to each of our major buildings. And although the town hall was the only LEED certified building, we did a lot of LEED-like certified projects with our different buildings so that they were well insulated, they had good windows, they were a tight seal. And that then allowed us to measure what our energy needs were for those updated buildings. And based upon that, we moved forward with power purchase agreements for solar. And in doing so, located solar on our ice rink, on our library, on our police station. And then we did a large 640 kW solar array at our gravel pit in the town of Lee. And in doing so, offset all of our electrical needs for our municipal infrastructure except for a wastewater treatment plant. And at the wastewater plant, we chose to pay a little more for energy and buy green wind energy using RECs on the open market. So we're doing what we can at this time to offset our electrical municipal costs and impacts. Other things that we've tried to do along the way is with staffing needs, that's a real problem. We don't have a designated staff person to look at climate change or sustainability or lead. Each of our departments are good at what they do. The police are good at policing, fire are good at putting out fires, public works is good at building roads, but who makes sure it's sustainable? And so that's really fallen on this office. And I don't necessarily have the expertise or the time to deal with it. So we've developed this wonderful partnership with the UNH Sustainability Institute, and we've brought on a number of these sustainability fellows over the last 5 or 6 years. And we've actually transitioned our summer program into a year-round program so that we have a fellow we're working with 12 months of the year to slowly move forward projects. And things aren't moving at lightning speed. They're moving at more of a glacial speed, but they're moving forward with force and consensus and impact, which has been really helpful and positive. So some of the things we're doing, let me just see. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Excellent. So first, I mentioned this, hold on, wrong picture. Hold on 1 second. What happened? I got to try this again. Sorry about that. Don't know why it won't, well, scratch that. One of the initiatives we did was to try to create awareness amongst the town people about climate change and what this means for Durham. So we partnered with a professor from Northeastern University, who was actually an art professor. And we came up with this program where we created sort of a scavenger hunt across Durham, where we developed these panels that give a glimpse into our collective future unless we do something about climate change. So here we're envisioning that by July 20th, 2040, all of our downtown buildings are powered 100% by renewable energy. And we've got 20 or so of these panels around the community. And so you can look at areas that we predict are going to be flooded in 10 years' time, areas that we think will be much more sustainable in terms of the growing season and local agriculture, et cetera. So that's sort of innovative and cool, the way we've gone about trying to address that. Another picture I want to show you, hold on a minute. I'm sorry, I've got to find, somehow I have lost, hold on a minute. I'm just trying to get back to, here we are. The Zoom. There we go. Sorry about that, everybody. Oh, it keeps coming back to this. Okay, well, scratch that. I'm just going to come back to our group. So something else that we've tried to really focus on is our forests. We have approximately 40% of the land area in Durham, New Hampshire is permanently conserved. It's either land that's forested and owned by the town, owned by the University of New Hampshire, or is owned by nature privately, but there are conservation easements on these properties. And a lot of them we have public access. So we realized that with the land Durham owned, we were not doing a very good job managing that land in a productive way to make sure those fields and forests were healthy and to make sure they were accessible. So we've really ramped up our efforts in those areas. And one of the things that we were curious about was the positive benefit that forested land had in the area of carbon sequestration. And what we found was that there's a huge amount of carbon sequestration going on our forests. And the better we maintain them, the more carbon we can contain there. And in addition, it's provided an additional rationale for land conservation. And so as recently as the beginning of this year, we are moving forward with the Southeast Land Trust to acquire an additional 40-acre parcel with a lot of forested land. And part of the rationale we had was carbon sequestration. So we thought that was really powerful. We've been trying to move forward with EV downtown. We have 2 chargers in one of our parking lots and 1 at our public library. And we're slowly trying to build that out in a more robust way. We also are slowly moving forward with the integration of hybrid vehicles in our police fleet and other fleets that we have within the municipality. I think the big nugget we're trying to get at is when can we do like electric public works vehicles or electric large fire vehicles? And our understanding is those are not yet viable for us, but we're monitoring all the time so that when they become viable and we're comfortable with them, we can slowly move into that area. Some other things that we've done is Newmarket has done this as well, but we've worked with the University of New Hampshire and the Stratford Regional Planning Commission on a sea level rise saltwater incursion analysis to see and map out the predicted impacts of sea level rise on private wells, private septic systems, and on critical infrastructure. And that's going to help us to fine tune our hazard mitigation plan over time. We're doing a lot of work with shoreline stabilization, particularly at Wagon Hill Farm, but also in other places in the community. And I remember thinking back in the early 2000s, sort of watching the seawall in Portsmouth wash out, and they'd rebuild it, and it would wash out again, and they'd rebuild it. And at a certain point, I thought to myself, guys, you better get used to it. This is the future, it's coming. And that's what's been playing out. And again, this realization that something, I think when people start to realize something is happening here and we need to take action to be ready for it, that's when you can really get some momentum moving forward. To help our private businesses and private homeowners to think actively about things like efficiency, adaptation, mitigation, we have an energy checklist. And so when somebody comes into the building office, they want to do improvement, they have to go through this checklist to at least, we're not going to force them to do anything, but we're going to force them at least to evaluate what they potentially could do to have a more efficient and sustainable structure. And something else we've done is we've looked at anticipated sea level rise in Durham in our low-lying areas, and we've created a zoning overlay district that calls out those locations. And folks who want to do construction in those areas are forced, again, we're not going to make them do it, but we're going to force them to think about where they're going to build, and the fact that they may want to think seriously about creating additional freeboard in that area. Because if they don't, the likelihood is in 20 or 30 years, they're literally going to be underwater. So again, we're not forcing them in Live Free or Die New Hampshire, but we're like confronting them with the facts so they can at least think strategically about that. The last couple of things I'll mention is we've worked with our sustainability fellow to do a carbon and nitrogen analysis for our community. What's our contribution? And we have now done that, and having that analysis in hand really lets us map out where our major impacts are. And once we know that, where we're best served to focus our energy. So for Durham, the 2 big areas are the built infrastructure on one side and transportation on the other. We feel right now we've got limited impact on transportation because a lot of that is beyond our control. But in the built environment, we feel we can do a lot. And so that caused us to think about and ultimately join the Community Power Aggregation Coalition of New Hampshire. And we're trying to create a viable path toward making green energy or more green energy the default for all of our electric customers. And that alone would dramatically lower Durham's carbon footprint. So that gives you some general ideas. We're in the draft form of a climate action plan that we're now rolling out to our boards and committees and commissions to get their feedback. Again, our sustainability fellow is the lead on this, which that's part of the benefit of that position. But I'll stop there. But a lot going on. It's really hard work. It takes a lot of time and focus and energy, but slowly we're making really good progress. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Todd. Now let's go to Greenland. I think we have several representatives from Greenland. You're on mute, Steve.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. Steve Smith from Greenland. I'm chairman of the Greenland Board of Selectmen. I will take just a few minutes to run through. Quite a few people have gone through all of the issues that Greenland faces as well. Dave Moore, our next door neighbor in Stratham. We have quite the same plans as they do. We run through Rockingham Planning Commission as well, through many of our master plan updates, our zoning updates. We just recently redid our hazard mitigation plan to deal with not only climate change, but all of the other hazards that we're looking at. I guess basically the hardest thing for the smaller towns is the funding and the priorities, where we, put the maintenance and repairs into as well as the high risk areas that, we don't just know right now what those high risks are. With sea level rise, everybody's talking about the sea level rise, that's going to affect the groundwater, not only, the wells, the dug wells, but also maybe the aquifer protection areas that we have. We supply water to the city of Portsmouth through their Portsmouth well here in Greenland. So that's a consideration. One of the other considerations, and it hasn't been talked about as much, is the effects of drought. We have several farms in the area. Drought and continuing higher levels of temperature and the unsustainability of having water provided to supplement irrigation is an issue. It's not only the farmers that are making hay for their animals, but it's also the vegetables, the crops, and it goes on and on. I'll just touch on a couple of things at Greenland. I mean, like I said, we updated our master plan and zoning amendments on a routine basis. We consider our hazardous mitigation plan every 2 years. We just finished that this last year. We're working with RPC on an MS4 water quality control. We've recently implemented energy reduction through savings of light and power at the town hall with municipal green energy savings. We implement solar exemptions for town. We have a large project here in town. The Lowe's building and Target here in town are both solar exempt. Wind turbine zoning, we have a zoning exception for wind turbines, and just recently implemented a CELT easement for conservation of 154 acres of open space land to protect water quality. So that's what we're doing in Greenland. There's a lot of other things that are going on, but we're trying to get the word out as best we can. We have website notifications every time a tax bill is sent out. We stuff envelopes with notifications of how you can protect the water quality. And so that's pretty much what I have. I just want to be real quick. I know we're running short on time. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen, do you have anything to add?
Introduce myself. I'm brand new on the Conservation Commission in Greenland, and I'm a natural resource steward from UNH's program and a project manager. So I'm here for a lot of absorption of learning and moving forward. And I appreciate all your comments, and I've taken a lot of notes. So, thank you.
Likewise. Okay, Exeter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Murphy. I was formerly part-time employee for the town of Exeter, and as of April 1st, my responsibilities were extended to full-time as as a conservation and sustainability planner. So a lot of what had been done prior to me was sort of catch as catch can, much as many of you described. And I'm really looking forward to having some staff time to dedicate coordinating the activities of the different departments and volunteer boards that we have. So Exeter has done quite a bit of land use related activities. So we have a pretty progressive conservation program. We have, I think it's 32% of our land base has been conserved. We have proactive land use regulations for wetlands, wetland buffers, our shoreline. And so really now we're trying to sort of make the shift to focus more on or to include actions related to energy reduction and sustainability in general. We had a volunteer board, the Sustainability Advisory Committee, and they were instrumental in passing through our town meeting, passing approval for funding to get my position established. And so they are very active. We're working right now on a single-use plastics prohibition on town-related properties. So for use applications that we have in town for, events, we would regulate the use of single-use plastics. Our energy committee is also very active. We just recently, through the planning board, updated our site plan review and subdivision regs to include a requirement for developments to be electric vehicle ready. A certain portion of parking lots for residential and commercial spaces are required to be EV ready. So it's not requiring them to install it, but the conduit needs to be in place. Let's see, we also did a climate resource education program where we informed and educated our land use boards and town staff on the different resources that are available. In March, we sought approval at town meeting for the installation of a solar array, and we are currently working through how to manage some additional costs that might be passed on through for upgrading the utility infrastructure and at a higher dollar amount than we had previously anticipated. So that's sort of in the exploration stage. We are also discussing joining the HydroNet metering agreement, similar to, I can't remember who had mentioned that, but which will bring a substantial quarterly check to the town. I think it's something like $16,000. So that's really exciting. It seems like a good move to kind of fund a lot of our initiatives. Also town meeting, the town voted to authorize the select board to implement community power aggregation. We did have a sustainability fellow from UNH a couple of years ago who prepared a greenhouse gas inventory for municipal operations. Our public works is, I'm going really fast, but I feel the time crunch pressure.
No, you shouldn't. That's okay.
Public Works has been instrumental. They offer Mr. Fox composting at our transfer facility, which has been incredible and has diverted a dramatic amount of food waste from the landfill in 2021. And then they just recently signed an agreement, I think the end of last year, to an organization called HelpSee, which supports textile recycling. So anyone can schedule a pickup at their home on a certain day. And so any textiles, rather than putting them in the landfill, and they don't have to be, perfectly used clothing. It's a variety of materials that they accept. And I think it was last month, it was something like 976 pounds of textiles were collected. So it's actually proven to be very popular, which is exciting. Great Dam was removed. I think we were also able to capitalize on the recognition that climate change is having an impact with the Mother's Day and Patriots Day flooding events. And so I think that had a strong influence on the community's goal to take some action. We are working on a bike pedestrian master plan. And let's see, who has been involved? The people who have been involved are primarily department heads and staff. The Energy Committee, the Conservation Commission, Sustainability Advisory Committee are really kind of the major players in terms of our resilience efforts and our climate action efforts. Our priorities. So I kind of feel like up until this point, it's sort of been popcorning ideas. You know, funding becomes available, and so then we'll chase that funding down. And it really hasn't been a concerted, although we have updated our master plan, it just really seems like you're almost constantly chasing money to achieve project goals, which I think is a challenge because it's not as strategic, I guess, as I would hope it would be. But we also haven't had staff to dedicate to it. So successes. The dam removal project really brought the town together, I would say. It was a very controversial project, and a lot of the community has now come around and shown support for that effort. We have an Alewife Festival, which is an environmental fair that we're bringing back this year in celebration of river restoration, and there seems to be a lot of popularity around the event. So it's bringing together all of our environmentally oriented committees. So we have a tree committee and a pollinator pathways group and conservation commission, sustainability. All of them are coming together to kind of host an environmental fair. Let's see. So we do not have a climate action plan, and I think that has kind of led to sort of the popcorning. We do have a very current action agenda in our master plan that's incorporated a lot of the regional guidance, but coming up with strategic ways and having that target for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, I think is really what we need to sort of drive home initiatives and in a more organized effort. So yeah, where do I see our climate action plan in the next 1 to 3 years? Hopefully we have one. That's a charge for me. And you know, hopefully by then we're hitting the ground, getting some targets achieved.
Great. Thank you, Kristen.
Sure.
Okay, now I know that I heard things from various people that I'm more curious about, but I'm hoping that you folks have some questions you'd like to ask. So if you just want to raise your hand, I will call on you and, you know, ask anyone that you heard from that you have a question about. Please go ahead.
And so Todd Seligan Derbs, I just wanted to offer feedback to Kristen Murphy in terms of where you are now in Exeter. And I think you're in a really good place. You know, you've done so much work, and we found ourselves in the same position where we've done a lot of work, but we started to ask ourselves, okay, this is great, but where are we in the process? How do we measure this, and how do we assess where to go next? And that caused us to start to think about, like, would something like a climate action plan be helpful? And ultimately we felt it would. And then we started to move down that path, and it helped. It's helping us now to narrow our focus on what's next. So I just want to compliment you and everybody on the great work outlined on this call. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I mean, it sounds like we're just sporadically doing stuff. We're really not. We've been very progressive. It's just, it feels a little sporadic, I guess, without boxes to tick off. But yeah.
And with big items, like some items are small and some are heavy lifts. And like for Exeter, like the Great Dam, or the dam was a huge topic, huge. It took, years to work through, and a lot of cycles of staff and volunteers. So, you're making good progress.
Kristen, you had mentioned, who was it that was doing the textile recycling for Exeter?
So the organization is called HELPSY, HELPSY. And it's at no cost to the municipality. It really has been a great collaboration.
Excellent. I was also wondering, Doviv or Jennifer, if you can sort of outline what a municipality has to do in order to get a fellow to come on board for any particular town.
Sure. So, and for those of you that have already done it, sorry to, be redundant, but for those that haven't, our cycle is that we put out a request for project proposals generally in November and ask anyone who's interested in hosting a fellow to outline, we want them to have pretty discrete projects, ideally, that they can kind of point to outcomes and add them to their portfolio at the end of the summer or at the end of the year, in the case of like the Durham example, which we've been really excited to be able to morph the model into a year-round model. So we put out a request for projects in November-ish, asked for them back in December-ish. That timeframe might bump up a little bit this year, so a little bit earlier. It is competitive, as Dovev said. This year we expanded to 30 fellows, and we're hoping to expand again next year. But even so, every year we end up turning away some great projects. So it's dependent a little bit on what funding we have, and also organizational ability to match, provide matching funds to help us fund more projects. We do also, and those of you who are our mentors could maybe speak to this more, but I mean, it's not just free help. There's a lot of, we ask a lot of our mentors too. Hopefully there's value in that ultimately, but I mean, I guess I just want to acknowledge that a big part of the great experience for the fellows is the great mentorship they get from the folks that they're working with in the municipalities. You can apply for a graduate or undergraduate. We let you know if we're including your project, usually end of December, early January, and then we kind of move through a work planning process in the spring before the fellows start with us at the beginning of June. And it's a June through August kind of cycle.
I can speak to a little bit, just having had several fellows here in Portsmouth. It's excellent to do your greenhouse gas inventory. It's kind of a discrete project that can fit in over a summer. And you can manage, you have to work with them, but it's not a huge time commitment, but it is certainly a commitment to do that. And commitment of funds, you have to match the amount that they give the fellow. But we use them for that, and we also use them on our sustainability project, our vulnerability assessment. We had a fellow going around knocking on doors, getting information from the residents downtown on their basements flooding and things like that. So it's been really great for the city, and probably we'll look at doing one again in the fall.
Bert? You're on mute, Bert.
That's not the first time that's happened. Thanks. I'd like to address this question to Jackson. Peter had said one of the hurdles to overcome is how to get the resources, both for financial and staffing in the municipality, to really address the urgency to accelerate our movement towards a climate healthy planet, given we have a short time frame and window to go into. And Jackson, I'm getting the perception that you said you have 40 hours a week, and that I'm sure you feel like you could use a lot more hours, but it sounds to me like you're filling a little bit of that maybe coordination staffing needs, and a lot of the outreach that you mentioned seem to be working. So the question I have for you is, how are you perceived? And are you a long-term hire? Are you part of the staff? Some people have talked about, oh, do we get a grant and then we lose the person? Or can we really create a structure that's going to have the type of leverage and strategy potential of somebody who coordinates? That's a lot to throw out at you, but any response?
No, that's a really good question. So I'm full-time and I'm funded through the general fund. So it's not grant-based. So my funding is guaranteed for the foreseeable future unless there were to be some big budget cuts. But that was a big ask of the council, and that's why it took a few years for them to come around to the idea of having somebody in this type of role. And it morphed over time. Initially, the Energy Commission suggested having someone as an energy manager. And they spoke with staff and sort of figured out that, okay, having someone focus on, broader resiliency issues might be a better fit because, prior to my role, there wasn't really anyone to sort of coordinate between the various departments on some of these efforts. And a lot of what I do is just connecting people with other people and making sure that there's a centralized point of contact for ideas and moving things forward. But when you're going to talk to someone that's making a decision about creating a position like this, I think highlighting the fact that energy alone is such a big fraction of costs associated with municipal operations that if you can bring someone in that's able to help with decision making and projects that reduce your energy expenditures, they can easily cover the cost of their salary pretty quickly. And I've already kind of seen that to be true with some of the programs. The one program that I developed covers over half of my salary, and I've been on board 8 months now. So, I hope that helps answer your question, but with climate change being such an issue and for us with inland flooding potentially affecting some of our municipal facilities that are really important, we need people to address and prepare for things now. Otherwise, it's going to be much more expensive later, far more expensive than paying a salary annually.
Yeah, I liked what you said, Jackson, about doing the life cycle analysis in the long term rather than the short. And I'm glad to hear that you got a project that is paying for half your salary, because that's always good for us to hear that there are monies to be saved. And this is, I think, the way to get resilience and mitigation is to have solutions that meet both and help move us towards the big goal that we want. So thanks. That was very helpful, Jackson.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, Jennifer?
Thanks. I have a kind of a follow-up to that because I was ruminating on that too and thinking that we're always trying to present things in terms of total cost of ownership and often having a hard time getting people past the sticker, the first cost piece. But one of the things we've been talking about in our energy task force is, are there ways to incorporate the social cost of carbon or other ways to monetize future costs associated with climate change in our planning and our budgeting with individual departments? And I'm wondering if any of the municipalities on this call have done any of that or talking about doing any of that, kind of using future costs projections as an opportunity to frame climate related projects as necessary cost saving measures or not.
It's certain
I
for
would
Dover.
say-
Sorry.
From the political angle, I think that is an effective strategy. Something that's sticking out in my mind is just the time we went. So Portsmouth was asked or decreed through the EPA that we would have a stormwater mitigation plan, and part of that was in the Sagamore Creek area. The previous council that I was on spent about 2 years talking about this, whether or not it needed to happen. COVID hit, investment projects went through the roof. And now the same half of the project gets us half of the it costs twice as much to do now that COVID has come and gone. So it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison of, hey, this is the cost now in the future. But I think that at least right now, people are aware, or at least we're entering into an inflationary period. I don't know how long it lasts, but the idea that future costs are going to be higher, I think for the first time, at least in the last 3 years, is a definite reality for us, just from a financing standpoint of, hey, we got to do this because costs are rising, and it's going to cost a lot more for us to do this when we have to do more long term. And so as we go into the budget season, I've been trying to keep some of those at least failures top of mind when we're looking to ask for more money up front to be able to invest in some of the infrastructure projects, because there's a lot of money from the feds that is going around, and we're all going to be competing with each other to try to find the right, the firm that's going to be doing the work.
And Jackson?
Sure, I was just going to add that, climate change implications are tied into our CIP planning, like the 5-year plan that we produce here in Dover, and definitely is sort of at the forefront of thinking of some of our infrastructure projects. And I know there's been a lot of talk, for example, if we're going to do a project that involves some major site work, maybe it's the right time to spend a bit of extra money to, for example, put in electric vehicle supply equipment, because that's much less cost prohibitive if we're able to get those conduits in place and we're able to dig the trenches when the site work is actually happening, instead of having to rehab the site much later on. So yeah, I think we are trying to incorporate. I think we could do a better job than we do, but it's definitely something that's considered by community services, planning, and other departments.
Does anyone else have any comments?
I guess, Allison, I'm just curious. I appreciate everyone's time today, and it was really interesting hearing the different projects across the Seacoast. I'm just wondering, sort of, what are the next steps for this? What were you thinking?
Well, we were actually hoping that you could help with that. I mean, like we were thinking that maybe this would be a sort of touch-based meeting. I don't know, on a pseudo-regular basis, such as maybe twice a year or something like that, like come back in the fall and find out if anybody else has any questions or problems. I know that one of our the things that we've been most curious about is how municipalities are going to reach the community, because I think a number of you have said that the proportion of energy used by each municipality is so much less than what's being used by the residents. So, if we can think about that and come up with ways or things that have worked. I know that there were a couple of things that people mentioned, like the putting out the 2-page fact sheets. Jackson, I think you were talking about that, and just trying to make people aware easily of things that they can do to affect their energy usage, and that in the long run will affect climate change. I did like someone was talking about how they don't talk about climate change because there's some resistance to just even that terminology. But if you can talk about resiliency, that has enabled forward movement with having certain programs happen. But this is really we put it together hopefully so that you each would be able to communicate with one another on the subject. You have the sheet with all the contact information from those that had hoped to be able to attend at any rate today. And so you can reach out to them individually, or if there is a need, if everybody would like to get together again at some point in time, we can certainly arrange that.
I can just add a plug for the New England Municipal Sustainability Network. So Dovev mentioned it earlier, but there's a regional network that was really started by EPA, trying to get communities to start talking about sustainability and shared practices. And it's been going on for, gosh, I don't know how long it's been, since 2006, maybe, quite some time. And what I find is it's much more of a time commitment than what we're talking about here. But to me, one of the most beneficial pieces of that is sort of going around and hearing about people's projects and what they're doing, and then knowing who you can contact if you want to get a project like that going in your community, what the pitfalls were, how it worked. So to me, it seems like a positive thing. It could be a lot shorter than this call, but just a check-in, to go through new projects, see what people are doing, rather than going and checking all the community's websites. It's sort of a one-stop shopping way to hear updates for people that want to participate. To me, it makes sense because we're pretty close to each other and we have the similar challenges in our region. It might be something that could be, I would like to see it going forward, but don't be curious what other people think about that. Maybe a shorter version of the same thing, and Zoom makes it even quicker, really.
I have a couple follow-on questions or thoughts about that. One was, I was wondering how many folks here already participate in CAW also. I mean, it just seems like there's a few networks here that have a lot of overlap, and wondering if there's a way to kind of tag onto something that they do maybe. Yeah, NEMS being another. I was also thinking, Peter, about how we're looking at having that webinar about federal funding opportunities coming down the pike. And I don't remember who just referenced, maybe it was you, Mayor Cochran, the kind of funding opportunities and trying to get ahead of them and ready for them. And also realistically knowing that probably there'll be some competition, but maybe we can find things to collaborate on. And that kind of goes back to one of the things that I think Dovev referenced earlier too, which is if there are shared, research questions or sets of technical experts. I mean, maybe there are things that we can identify that would help multiple communities that we could think about in terms of those funding opportunities or those research questions that then UNH could help either with fellows or just working with individual departments to find faculty mentors and students who wanted to work on those things.
Very good.
Let me just add another thing. Jen Rowden, who sent me an email and said she had to leave early, said the Regional Planning Commission, at least for our region, I guess we're not all in the same region, if Newmarket's still on, and Durham, I think, but the Regional Planning Commission was gonna be reaching out about a similar sort of effort to strategize and coordinate the regional approach. So there are other opportunities out there, like CAW, like NEMS, that these things can happen.
So if any of you would like to direct, your thoughts about how this should move forward or what next steps, other than the fact that there are other organizations out there that are doing things that are similar. This, we really tried to gear just toward local municipalities because there are very similar, a lot of similarities between the problems that each municipality is having. At any rate, you have my contact information, you have Peter's contact information. So please get back to us, let us know what you thought, how we could improve it, and what you would like to see going forward.
Allison, you may have said this at the very beginning and I was a few minutes late joining, but are you a department of the city of Portsmouth, or are you a private entity?
Yeah, no, I'm part of Portsmouth Climate Solutions. Bert Cohen is our leader, and we evolved out of having taken the course about drawdown. And so there are a number of just residents of the region, and we do have more than Portsmouth, but we call ourselves Portsmouth Climate Solutions because that's where we're based. And we are obviously concerned about the environment and looking for ways that we can contribute to the town or different towns, our energy to try to help move things forward. So that's who we are.
No, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then, Todd, I don't know if it was caught at the beginning or if you missed it, but Peter and I were approached by Allison and Bert as a way to sponsor this from a municipal standpoint. It's been a focus of this council to meet climate change more directly. I would say that's the biggest change in Portsmouth over the last 4 years would be from a number of different constituents, and Portsmouth has a reputation. It doesn't always meet that expectation on the municipal level when it comes to our politics versus our national politics, but climate change has come to the forefront much more aggressively. It's much more of a I would say a topic of door to door, and that might be because of our proximity to the ocean, but or that seawall that other people might have noticed disintegrating, as you pointed out. But it's definitely much more of a talking point. And so it was our hope that with wrapping our arms around Allison and Bert and the energy that they're bringing, the people that we're trying to communicate with around this, it has to be as grassroots as possible. And so we want to encourage this type of grassroots collaboration with cities more so than we might have as a municipality in the past, and create avenues through our connection with other municipalities to bring them in front of you and hopefully spark more ideas so that we can have a broader discussion that includes as many citizens as possible and not just municipal leaders.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I just want to add that, Jennifer, I really liked what you were saying, that not only is it hard to get out of our individual energy and building code silos, but how to get out of the municipality to get monies that are going to really be functioning on the regional basis and can enhance everybody. And so I think we're in a time period, from my perspective at least, the path is uncharted. We are in a time frame and an accelerated urgency that we don't have the structures or the readily available mechanisms to strategize to do the magnitude of the job that we need to do in a short period of time. And I don't know anybody knows. It's very encouraging. I'm taking notes, and every Wednesday night we will go back to our community, Portsmouth Climate Solutions, say, here's what the municipalities are thinking. And our idea from Portsmouth Climate Solutions is, can we support whatever climate action plan comes into place? Because once the plan gets in place, that's just the beginning. And how do we get traction in the community and between communities to make it work? And I really, there are lots of organizations doing it, and nobody wants to be redundant in their time. So it's all kind of experimentation along that line.
This is Dovev speaking. So sorry if I missed this earlier, but just remind me what is the status of that climate action plan for Portsmouth? Does that have a certain time frame that's going to get into published form, or is that far out? Or wasn't sure.
I guess Peter could answer. We got the money for at least the start. So it's been funded with $100,000 through our CIP that was approved about a month ago now. So, in many ways, that's the, that went relatively smoothly, I would say. The idea that, and it was even, we started with, hey, we'll start with 50 and, it was doubled. And so it might need more. I imagine the cost of actually enacting a plan is going to be more significant than that. But I was surprised at how, people were as supportive of, working together to create a plan around that. So I would leave it to Peter to give you the details in terms of, what's the actual nuts and bolts and when we expect that to be done. I hope that we can steal from our neighbors if one has already been done as much as possible, and build upon that and then share that back with you. It's a leapfrog business that hopefully we can share around. But Peter, is there any more details on the timeline for that? Are we at
Just a little,
RFP yet?
yeah, so the budget will be adopted starting July 1st. So it's in the capital plan and it'll go into the budget process. And when it gets approved there, then we can start working. But along the lines of this group, there's a volunteer group in the community that has been working already on what the other climate action plans around the country and the region look like, what the key things those plans have that we want to do, how who wrote them, what contractors wrote them, how do they succeed in their public participation is our current question we're trying to get at, and it's a really big one because it's really important. And we're really looking to create actionable items in that. So it's not just let's reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, it's let's stop doing X so that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So we have specific actions that we'll take and encourage the community to do. But this public piece where we have residents helping with the RFP is really unusual for a lot of projects. But I think it's important that we do that to get the most bang for the buck, because as we keep saying, everybody has to participate. It can't just be the municipal government.
And we did just have a NEMS kind of a, brown bag session that was somewhat focused on that public participation in CAP planning issue. So we're certainly glad. I think we had compiled some resources. So if we can lend any of that back into the Portsmouth discussion, we're happy to do so from the NEMS perspective.
Yeah, that would be great. I was out of town on that one.
Yep.
Bert's holding up why local climate planning has failed. And that's a resource that this group that I've been talking about is using. And it has some really good information about what key things to put in your climate action plan to make it work as best it can.
If anyone needs a copy of that, I can forward it to them. Just drop me an email and let me know.
You anticipated my question. Thank you.
I just note, I think this concept of regional planning is really an interesting one. And I think there could be a lot of benefits to that if our taxing structure was different in terms of economic development for the Seacoast. But when we did our climate, our greenhouse gas inventory, approximately 45% of our emissions are from transportation, and the vast majority of that transportation is not local, it's through traffic. So imagine if we banded together and installed a toll booth, on Route 108, Route 4, the Spalding Turnpike, maybe at the traffic circle in Portsmouth, and electric vehicles could pass right through no problem, and gas vehicles are going to pay a toll, a significant toll, and really poor fuel efficient gas vehicles pay a larger toll. And then we distribute that maybe on a per capita basis amongst our Seacoast towns. Imagine what we could do and what we could incentivize.
An actionable item. Sounds good.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I do think that, I'm happy to send the note to the governor on our desire to have self-determination when it comes to raising money. But it's always interesting to me that we are split across two counties, and we're not necessarily set up for success when it comes to prioritizing the projects that we have to prioritize. And I guess a part of this is a commitment from Portsmouth as the mayor that we are in it to help prioritize the region when it comes to the projects that need to happen on the regional level, because we only think that this is going to happen. You know, the same conversation will happen on housing, but when it comes to the Rockingham County or Stratford County planning commissions, to be able to send letters of support when, you know, it doesn't necessarily benefit Portsmouth when it comes to climate, but it benefits the region, so it does benefit us. Those are the types of things that I would hope would come out of more dialogue among elected, but also you know, municipal employees that are working on behalf of the towns. That's the only way I think we're going to, you know, to tackle this in a meaningful way. And again, across 2 counties is tricky, but we are, you know, one region when it comes to the effects of climate change that will be felt more acutely than the rest of the state.
Right. Right. That's great.
So if we're all good now, I guess we can go ahead and close unless anyone else has any comments or questions.
Thanks,
And
Allison. Thanks for keeping it in the time as well.
you're welcome, Peter. And thank everyone for limiting the amount that they put together into a nice short summary. Well, we really appreciate you all participating in this. And as I said, please email me, email Peter, let us know what your thoughts are. If anyone needs that article, as I said, send me an email. I'll be glad to send it to you. And I hope you all have a great and productive rest of the year.
Thank you.
You too.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.